What the equator's for. Take a deco at this! Grandad held up a huge knobbly potato. A dead ringer for me old mate Humdrum. He had a dummy like this, Spud, all squints and bulges. Even the hooter on it. Grandad tapped a knob like a nose. Nearly as big as the rest of his head. Was Mr. Humdrum ugly? Ugly. When he walked down the street, the wires drooped on the telegraph poles, and the dogs howled and stuck their hands over their eyes. Why aren't potatoes round like a tennis ball? They're usually more oval-shaped, like an old rugby ball. There, that should be enough. How about running them up to the house? Your grandmother will be looking for them. Granny, I said, going into the kitchen, Grandad says this potato reminds him of Mr. Humdrum. So it does, the ill-favoured creature. Granny, have you ever seen a round potato? Not like I can recall offhand. Granny scrubbed the potatoes under the tap. They're usually oval, except for Mr. Humdrum here. Not like a tennis ball. As Granny shook her head, Grandad came in with another potato. It's about as close as a spud comes to being like a tennis ball. Round enough in the middle, but a bit flat at the top and the bottom. A bit like the world itself. Why is the world thicker at the middle? We all get thicker around the middle as we get older. That line like a belt round the middle of the world. Grandad, what's it called? The equator. Who put it there? Grandad looked over his shoulder. She's boiling the potatoes. Keep your voice down. I did. I drew the equator. Why? Got a belt to hold my puku in, so I thought I'd give the world one too. I sharpened a tea tree stick and walked backwards, scratching a line east across the Pacific Ocean, across South America, across the South Atlantic Ocean, across Africa, across the Indian Ocean, and then somewhere in the north of New Guinea. Bump! I came up against something that grunted. Why didn't you look where you were going? I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Who? Your grandmother had seen me start off, drawing the equator eastwards, so nothing would do but she must start drawing westwards. And that's how we bumped into each other's behinds, halfway behind the Bismarck Sea and the Caroline Islands to the north of New Guinea. Ever since then, the world's had a line called the equator round its middle. What's it for? It tells you all sorts of things, like if you're standing on the equator and you know why it's so hot, and when ships run over it they know they're either in the northern or the southern hemisphere. What about where you and Granny bumped into each other? There was nobody living there as far as I could see, and just as well too, because of the mess your grandmother made joining her line to mine. Imagine what it'd be like, never being quite sure which hemisphere you're in. What happened to your tea tree stick? By the time I bumped into your grandmother, it had worn down to about the length of your nose. What did you do with it? I brought it home. Everyone wanted to see the stick that drew the equator, but your grandmother burnt it in her stove. She's always been like that, you know. What about the stick she used? It wasn't as worn down like mine. Well, she didn't draw much of the equator at all. I split up her stick one day and used it to light my incinerator, and she's never forgiven me. Come and eat your tea, Granny called, or it'll get cold. Better not ask her about drawing the equator round the middle of the world. Your grandmother doesn't like to be reminded she can't draw a straight line.